Aren't all evil spiritual entities just demons? Well, as people, we tend to overgeneralize many things, and this is definitely true in regards to biblical concepts. Yes, the Bible principles are simple enough to be understood by a child, but also so deep that I feel that we've only scratched the surface of the earthly and spiritual wisdom and implications contained in the written and living word. So the Bible makes references to demons as well as other spiritual entities that are good, such as archangels. That's in Jude 1, verse 9. Cherubim, few different places, but in Genesis 3, verse 24, in Ezekiel chapter 10, and seraphim, Isaiah 6, verse 2. Um, that's not an exhaustive list, but just some examples. But understand that every type of spiritual entity doesn't have to be directly or even indirectly mentioned in the Bible in order for it to exist. There are tens of thousands, if not millions, of different types of unclean spirits. Now, we tend to use the terms demons and unclean spirits interchangeably, but to be more technically correct, they're not the same thing. So demons tend to be, in my mind, more of the worker bees and are at the bottom of the food chain, the authority chain, if you will, in terms of demonic authority. Again, at least that's how I see it. I've had unclean spirits tell me, I'm not a demon. They wouldn't respond. I was asking, like, are you a demon? Wouldn't get any answer. And then, are you an unclean spirit? Okay, yes. Well, why didn't you answer? Until he told me. What exactly makes the distinction? I can't say that I know. So, demons are unclean spirits, but not all unclean spirits are demons. I think that's how it works, if I said that right. Which is how I approach it, anyways. I think you know what I meant. Regardless, they reside in us, in our house, our temple, or even our inner world. A shout out to Luke 17, verse 21 there. Or maybe they're connected to us in some kind of way via a spiritual tie, because there's more than just soul ties, by the way, or some, maybe a portal or whatever. There's just so many different ways that, as the Paul says, that the sin so easily entangles us that it's kind of mind-boggling to me. And I don't say that to cause fear, but just for us, rather, not to be ignorant. Now, when ministering, we often go for the strong man, per Luke 11, verses 21 through 28. And there may be several layers before we get to the top of that ladder, several rungs, if you will. And then sometimes I'll ask what spiritual entity, unclean spirit there is that's managing the strong man that is in the person. In other words, what entity, unclean entity, that is external to the person, that is managing those that are inside the person. And because sometimes there are some uh, unclean spirits that are so big and so powerful and prideful and stuff like that, they don't really even want to get in us at all. They kind of find that kind of disgusting. And so they're like, why would I do that? And so Anyways, sometimes they will come up. Sometimes I don't think they're out in the universe somewhere and don't really want to inhabit us. Now, I've encountered, by Yah's grace, what I believe were stars or even constellation that were unclean, dragons, Draco, um, stuff like that. And one time I even encountered a legion of demons that may have called, that some may call the universe, but these ones call themselves the collective unconsciousness. That's another story. Um, Genesis 6 also makes reference to the Nephilim, which you may have been seeing a lot about this in YouTube and stuff like that. I know I have. I can't say I watched it all. Don't know about everything Nephilim. I'm not going to say that. But some people think that Nephilim just means men of renown, of fame. I tend to disagree, as I actually do believe that unclean spirits were having offspring with earthly women, as they were trying to taint the bloodlines early on, which is why Yah, God, had to wipe everyone out. Me, myself, I don't believe that demons are Nephilim. I think they're a separate class. Uh, just my thoughts at this present time. I'm sure there's uh, more to the story as to why Yah had to wipe out uh, the whole population, because there'd have to be some serious iniquity for that to happen. And I'm sure, I can believe the stories how these fallen angels were sharing knowledge and stuff like that, as it states in Enoch and perhaps other places. Anyways, I'm sure there's more to the story, but that's the skinny of it. And while I don't think I've ever encountered a human Nephilim, I do believe that I've encountered a Nephilim in the spirit. Although, and I think I've also ran into a hybrid one time. It was like a half lizard, half cyborg computer looking thing, which was like a cross between C3PO and a stormtrooper, if you will, which is the quickest way I could, describe that. I think he said his name was Osaka Okala. Um, Maybe it was Obama. Yeah, I think it was Obama. Something like that. Anyways, um, I've also run into different elementals. You may have heard of these. Sometimes in the witchcraft circles, they'll refer to them as water, fire, earth, air, or spirit. And these are actual spiritual entities that are neutral, but can be influenced to be either good or bad, depending on whom they're working with. In the Bible, we see Yah, for example, riding on the wind, like in Psalm 104, verse 3. In Ezekiel 1, the Bible there talked about, cherubim, um, gave them a particular look, described them. And then similarly, in Ezekiel 10, verse 9, the Bible states this. And I looked, and behold, there were four wheels besides the cherubim, one beside each cherub, and the appearance of wheels was like sparkling beryl, a stone, a gem. And as for their appearance, the four had the same likeness, as if a wheel were within a wheel. When they went in any of their four directions without turning as they went, but whatever direction the front wheel faced, the others followed without turning as they went. And their whole body, their rims, and their spokes, their wings, and the wheels were full of eyes all around. Hmm. The wheels that the four of them had. As for the wheels, they were called, in my hearing, the whirling wheels. And everyone had four faces. The first face was the face of the cherub. The second face was a human face. The third face was the third face of a lion, and the fourth, the face of an eagle. Have you ever wondered what Yazoo looks like? Anyways, that's some crazy supernatural stuff. In ministering, we've also run into, huge spiritual insects, kind of like, praying mantises coming out of a huge black hole in the ground, spiritually, which I now think was a portal to hell or someplace like that, but I didn't know that back then. Um, the point is that there is just so much to Yah's creation. So I get slightly amused when I tell religious people about these spiritual encounters, and they look at me like I'm nuts because they're fine with it when it's written in the Bible. But it hasn't hit them yet that this is reality that we're all living in, whether you realize it or not, and that the Bible is a supernatural book. And we are, I can argue, more spiritual beings than we are perhaps soul and flesh for sure. So I just share these things with you to help normalize it because, in my mind, these types of encounters, particularly the good ones, should be normal. I know of people that will not share what they see with others because they feel the majority of churchgoers and such will ostracize them, will cast them aside, be like, we don't want nothing to do with you. Um, I guess that's one of the benefits of me having dealt with rejection in my life, because for the most part, I don't really care if people accept me or not, as I have to declare his truths. And so I have to get past that in order to help the people that are hurting. We also know, to carry this a little bit further, that the earth groans because it is under a curse, as stated in Isaiah chapter 24, as well as the whole creation is groaning, as stated in Romans 8, verse 22. So there is a spiritual aspect to all facets, or most facets, of his creation, which makes sense because Yah is life. So everything that he creates has to have part of his essence in it, which is life to some degree, that they have to have that to some degree. Now, I'm not going to get into the nefesh, the ruach, the neshama in this video, which are levels of life and awareness, if you will, and distinguishes how humans differ from animals or plant life. If you want to look at that, you can do that. Walk with Yah has some teachings on that as well. But I want to end with this, because the Bible has this to say about Yeshua, as it states in Colossians chapter 1, starting verse 15. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. So, no matter what type of unclean spirit you may be dealing with, and we all probably really are, just know that when we profess Yeshua, Jesus, as our Savior, He created them all. And we have one in us that is greater than that which tries to come against us, and that we can be overcomers through Him. And so I just want to give you that hope. There's a reason that this stuff, that they're allowed to have their way for now. But fight the good fight, be a good soldier, and we will win. If you've read the end of Revelation, if you haven't, giving you a little bit of a spoiler alert there, so which you might need. Anyways, this is Noe with Walk with Yah. I pray that this helps you, and just know that maybe your miracle could be next.